A new lawsuit filed in the fight against terror. Families of 143 Americans killed or wounded in Afghanistan are now suing U.S. and international contractors. They accuse the companies of hiring the Taliban for security services, which they say later ended up funding deadly attacks on U.S. service members. Joining me now, Walid Phares. He's a Fox News national security and foreign affairs analyst. Walid, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Ed.
What do you think about the merits of this case?
Well, this case raises a lot of questions, both on the legal perspective and, of course, geopolitically. First, the legal, those who are suing will have to establish two things, one of two things at least. One is that the money paid by these companies or contractors, that money served to buy weapons for these attacks to take place. So that's a very tight argument. The other argument would be that the security arrangements made with the Taliban or other jihadists in general terms, helped the Taliban to attack U.S. targets around Afghanistan. So that would be their argument. The argument of the other side, defendants, is that basically this was agreeable, we were defending ourselves, and there is no link between our arrangements and the action that took place. So we're going to see how it's going to play in court, actually.
Well, it has to be so painful for these families who lost loved ones, Americans who are serving this country, and the Taliban ends up, using this money to fund attacks that result in these deaths when they thought their families were going to be secure.
You know, Ed, the major point is going to be, with time now, we'll see it through the court system, was the U.S. command aware of these security arrangements? I mean, if they were security companies, one would assume so. But if they were just companies who have some security elements and who cut deals with the Taliban, any kind of a deal, have the Taliban work in the company or paying a tribe, the tribe will pay the subcontractor, we don't know. We will see. But that would be the major question at the end of the day.
I want to ask you about another story, which is that we were hearing about over the last couple of days. An attack in Nigeria by an ISIS affiliate, about 11 Christians targeted and killed. Talk about that case first, and then we'll talk about the broader crisis.
Well, let me begin by saying that there is no way to protect every single family, church, Christian communities across Africa or around the world. But the U.S. should start thinking strategically about these matters, because we have a policy. The Trump administration, in this case backed by the majority of Congress, in Congress, they do want to protect these endangered minorities around the world. But the protection is not going to come from conferences and speeches and, or even humanitarian aid dispensed to churches. That is good. But we need to look practically on the ground, what can be done. And it cannot be universal. It's going to be country by country, organization by organization.
And how do you tackle that? Because as you study the issue, there are Christians persecuted all around the world, as you know, particularly in the Mideast. But as I understand it, Asia is an area now where we're seeing it much more prevalent.
Absolutely. I mean, you start from Indonesia to Malaysia to Pakistan. We had many, many cases. And, of course, all the way to Mali and Burkina Faso a month ago had a similar situation. If the countries are allies, then you're going to work with the governments. If there's chaos in the country or problems such as in Iraq, you're going to work with these communities. So really it's going to be case by case with a focus on actual protection, not just delivering speeches about it or the principles or the ideology.
Yeah. So last question. What do you think is the best strategy for the U.S. going forward? You talked about not just throwing money at the problem.
Well, first of all, you're going to identify the communities. Are they assembled in one geographical place? Then you're going to think about protection. If they are dispersed across the country, then you're going to work with whom? With the government, with their military. We send a lot of foreign aid and military aid to these governments. They should slice part of it to protect these individuals and these families.
All right. Walid Phares, we certainly appreciate your insight today, as always.
Thank you for having me.